When trying to understand anything, economies, markets, the weather, whatever, one can approach the subject with two perspectives. Top down, by trying to find the one code/law that drives them all. For example, in the case of markets, one could study universal laws like supply and demand that affect all economies and markets. In the case of species, one could focus on learning how the genetic code, the DNA, works for all species. Or bottom up, by studying each specific case and codes/laws that are true for them. For example, the codes or particular to the market for wheat or the DNA sequence that make ducks different from other species. So we're going to be reading Principles, Ray Dalio. I need to figure out which way to hold it. There we go. So that it's on the Bigo and on the Zoom. We are reading the life principles that Ray Dalio is talking about. We're already on page 138. I cannot believe how fast this is going. Let's get into it. I have a big day today. I am sure most of you have a big day today. The idea is not to have an easy life, but to create a life that is amazing, that you fill with all sorts of wonderful things. Hopefully the reading is going to give you some really good motivation and thoughts and ideas around that. And let's do some reading and have some fun. So we were talking about higher level thinking, and it makes us as humans unique. We can think about the past, we can think about the future, we can plan for things, we can do things differently. We talked about the advantage and the disadvantage. So the advantage means that we can create more, do more, and allows us to create a future, whereas other animals only do things on instinct. But the disadvantage is that sometimes we can overanalyze, overthink, and we can create times in our lives where we think something is an issue that isn't really an issue because we have been able to think about it too much. Okay, let's continue. When trying to understand anything, economies, markets, the weather, whatever, one can approach the subject with two perspectives. Top down, by trying to find the one code/law that drives them all. For example, in the case of markets, one could study universal laws like supply and demand that affect all economies and markets. In the case of species, one could focus on learning how the genetic code, the DNA, works for all species. Or bottom up, by studying each specific case and codes/laws that are true for them. For example, the codes or particular to the market for wheat or the DNA sequence that make ducks different from other species. Seeing things from the top down is the best way to understand ourselves and the law of reality within the context of overarching universal laws. That's not to say it's not worth having a bottom-up perspective. In fact, to understand the world accurately, you need both. And I was about to say that, but Ray's just done it for me. By taking a bottom-up perspective that looks at each individual case, we can see how it lines up with our theory about the laws that we expect to govern it. When they line up, we're good. By looking at nature from the top down, we can see that much of what we call human nature is really animal nature. I will definitely agree with that. A lot of people will say that humans are different, but we are run by similar programs. We function the same way, and we have a lot of similar biology, and our nature is very similar to animals as well. That's because the human brain is programmed with millions of years of genetic learning that we share with other species and with our ancestors. Because we share common roots and common laws, we and other animals have similar attributes and constraints. For example, the male-female reproductive system using two eyes to provide depth perception, and many other systems are shared by many species in the animal kingdom. Similarly, our brains have some animal parts that are much older in evolutionary terms than humanity is. These laws that we have in common are the most overarching ones. They wouldn't be apparent to us if we just looked at ourselves. If you just looked at one species, ducks for example, to try to understand the universal laws, you'd fail. Similarly, if you just looked at mankind to understand the universal laws, you'd fail. Man is just one of 10 million species and just one of the billions of manifestations of the forces that bring together and take apart atoms through time. Yet most people are like ants, focused only on themselves and their own anthill. They believe the universe revolves around people and don't pay attention to the universal laws that are true for all species. So I am fascinated by how we are like animals and how we react to certain things and how we get emotional about market conditions or these things or those things. And I think that the more you understand that, the more you're open to it and the more you understand, the better it's going to be. So I think that Ray Dalio definitely has a very big point here about being able to understand things that you might think are unrelated or you might think are not important. I spent my whole life looking at seeing if I can understand how animals and humans function and why we function that way and how we can use that to our own advantage in order to be able to achieve our goals, for example. So a lot of things that we might think are not important are actually very, very important. To try to figure out the universal law of reality and principles for dealing with it, I found it helpful to try to look at things from nature's perspective. While mankind is very intelligent in relation to other species, we have the intelligence of moss growing on a rock compared to nature as a whole. We are incomparable of designing and building a mosquito, let alone all the species and most of the other things in the universe. So I start from the premise that nature is smarter than I am and try to let nature teach me how reality works. 100% agree. A. Excuse me. Don't get hung up on your views of how things should be because you'll miss out on learning how they really are. It's important not to let our biases stand in the way of our objectivity. To get good results, we need to be analytical rather than emotional. Whenever I observe something in nature that I, or mankind, think is wrong, I assume that I am wrong and try to figure out what nature is doing that makes sense. That has taught me a lot. It has changed my thinking about 1, what's good and what's bad, 2, what my purpose in life is, and 3, what I should do when faced with my most important choices. To help explain why, I will give you a simple example. When I went to Africa a number of years ago, I saw a pack of hyenas take down a young wildebeest. My reaction was visceral. I felt empathy for the wildebeest and thought that what I had witnessed was horrible. But what was that because it was horrible, or was it because I am biased to believe it's horrible when it's actually wonderful? That got me thinking, would the world be a better or worse place if what I'd seen hadn't occurred? That perspective drove me to consider the second and third order consequences so that I could see that the world would be worse. I now realize that nature optimizes for the whole, not for the individual, but what most people judge good and bad based only on how it affects them. What I have seen was the process of nature at work, which is much more effective at furthering the improvement of the whole than any process man has ever invented. Most people call something bad if it is bad for them, or bad for those they empathize with, ignoring the greater good. This tendency extends to group. One religion will consider its beliefs good and another religion's beliefs bad to such an extent that their members might kill each other in the mutual conviction that each is doing what's right. Typically, people's conflicting beliefs or conflicting interests make them unable to see things through another's eyes. That's not good and it doesn't make sense. While I could understand people liking something that helps them and disliking things that hurt them, it doesn't make sense to call something good or bad in an absolute sense based on how it affects individuals. To do so would presume that what the individual wants is more important than the good of the whole. To me, nature seems to define good as what's good for the whole and optimizes for it, which is preferable. So I have come to believe that as a general rule. And that is absolutely true, because what is really good or bad? If the hyenas don't kill the wildebeest, they're going to go hungry. They're not going to be able to survive. So it's not that one thing is good or bad. It's good from two perspectives. It's not really bad at all. There's a purpose to it, and the whole of nature, as Ray Dalio talks about, is optimized for the whole group, for everyone, not just for an individual. There's an interesting story that I read once, and it's about a vegetarian who goes into a field with a bull, and he's expecting that the bull's not going to attack him because he's vegetarian, because he's not going to attack the bull. The bull obviously doesn't know this. The bull has learned and has the instinct to protect his territory. If he sees anybody coming into his territory, then his instinct, which is for the good of his whole community, is to attack. And so the same thing applies from every angle. So we can't be upset that the bull is attacking us even though we're vegetarian. The bull can't know this. And everything serves its purpose. Everything is good. There is good in absolutely everything. So regardless of whether something looks bad to us, we have to realize that for nature, it's good. Nature doesn't care about us as an individual. It cares about the good of the whole planet, of making sure that everything can continue. And if it loses a life in that process, then that optimizes for the good. And it provides that death and that life loss, that young wildebeest, for example, provides life and provides nourishment and sustainment for those hyenas or for lions or for whoever else participates in that. So a very, very interesting way of looking at things. And I think that the more you can look at it from that point of view, the more you're going to be able to succeed in life, because you're going to look at life not just as a black and white, good or bad, and see bad, but you'll see a lot more good, and you'll be able to fit into life a lot better. That as a general rule, B, to be good, something must operate consistently with the laws of reality, contribute to the evolution of the whole. That is what is rewarded. For example, if you come up with something the world valued, you almost can't help but be rewarded. Conversely, reality tends to penalize those people, species, and things that don't work well and detract from evolution. In looking at what is true for everything, I've come to believe that, but let's go back to that for a second. So when it comes to nature, if an animal is not going to follow its nature, if it's not going to procreate, if it's not going to do all of these different things that it's supposed to do. Let's say that a lion says from one day to the next, it's not good to hunt, I'm going to stop hunting. And the lion stops hunting. That lion is going to die. And if all lions start doing this, lions are going to go extinct. So there are lots of different things that nature provides to us so that we automatically do what we need to do. So we have all of these instincts. Now, humans have lost some of this instinct because we live in cities and we do all of these different things differently. But we still have these laws. So we still need to follow the laws. If we don't eat the right food, we're going to get sick. If we don't do the right things, we're going to have other kinds of issues that are going to come up. Now, the really interesting thing around this is that when it comes to business, for example, or investing, there are also laws around it. So if I create something and I market it in a way that it doesn't appeal to people, if I create a product and that product does not appeal to people, then I can create something that I think is wonderful, but it will not have an impact. Sometimes we need to twist the marketing a little bit, or we need to create the product based on what people want, because we need to first attract them, and we need to do that using and following these laws. If the laws are there and people can see something that appeals to them, they will go for it. Even if something is created that is better than a product that uses those laws, people won't know about it because they're not attracted to it. So very often we might need to create an illusion around the product. So we might need to, for example, let's say that, let's see if I can find something. So let's just take this bottle of water, for example, that I have. There we go. So I have a bottle of water. Now, this one, I actually find it interesting because this one, I'm surprised that it actually sells that much, because it uses marketing that I think would turn people off. I think people just don't read the actual label on this one, because it will talk about peeing, and it will have like a pee guide so that you can see what color your pee is in order to be able to compare it so that you can be healthy. Now, that's going to appeal to a certain group of people, but it's also going to turn a certain group of people off. So depending on how much you want to be able to sell that bottle of water, you might need to change the messaging so that you no longer talk about peeing and you look at it from a different perspective. It also contains wildflowers, for example, and it has no taste, but it has these wildflowers, so it's supposed to be good for you. So everything that we do, regardless of whether it ideologically fits in with our beliefs or not, it needs to fit the laws of nature. So if, for example, let's say, for example, when I had my cafe, I could say that I really dislike loud music in the cafe. And I don't think that it's really good for people to listen to loud music. I think that it's off-putting to myself. However, if I have a cafe with no music, then people are not going to feel the energy that they need. Let's say that there are 5 cafes and 4 of them play music, 1 of them doesn't. And so I am ideologically against playing music in the cafe. However, because of that, everybody goes to the other cafes. They don't know why. It's just hardwired for humans to want to be in an environment with that music. So regardless of whether I'm for it or against it, I need to understand how humans are hardwired so that I can then adapt my business to it rather than the other way around and say, look, I know that humans are adapted to listening to music and that they're going to be attracted to that. And so they're going to go to the business that has the music, but I'm going to go against that. So it's really important to be able to understand from a business point of view what it is and how the human brain works. And then you need to create the product, you need to create everything around that product so that it taps into how the human is hardwired. And regardless of whether you agree with it or not, regardless of whether you like it or not, you need to do that in order to be able to get the results, because people will see the advertisement and they will react to it from a mental level, from an instinctual level. So everything, the marketing, the business itself, the product itself, how the product functions, how it interacts with people, it needs to work on the basis of what it is that is happening inside that person's brain. And they are going to have an automatic reaction based on how they are hardwired as a human. So that is a very, very important point. And I think that we can wrap it up for there. For the moment, I think that's a really, really great business lesson, but also a great investing lesson, because again, the same thing happens. You could be against certain things, but the human brain is hardwired. And so you could say that you dislike the fact that the stock market goes up and down rather than being more smooth. And the reason that happens is because people react to certain circumstances. They're going to react to certain news, even if it is absolutely ludicrous. Yesterday, I was reading in the newspaper that the euro had moved because of the French election results. Now, the euro area is much bigger than just France. It is Germany. It is lots of different bigger countries. It is not just France, but they were saying that that's what it reacted to. So people are going to either interpret it incorrectly, or they are going to react to certain things just because they think they should. And it's all because of how we are hardwired as humans. So we can complain about it and we can be against it and we can stop investing in the stock market because we don't like the fact that these things are happening, or in the foreign exchange market, all of these different things. But if we can understand how the human brain works, then we can create the marketing, create the product, create everything around that, and we will actually get the clients. Anybody who is against those laws, anybody who disagrees or is ideologically against them, is not going to get the clients. So whatever you do in business or in investing, the more you understand how the human brain works and how the human instinct works, the more successful you're going to be. And as you create things that people want on that level, not on the level of what we think or what we want, but on what the level is of what everybody else wants. So another story is obviously the fisherman who likes Mars bars. And so he puts a piece of Mars bar on his fishing line and goes fishing. Now, of course, fish aren't like humans. So fish are attracted to worms. So you need to put a worm on the hook to be able to catch a fish. But if you put a Mars bar, you could catch a human. But they don't generally swim underwater, and I doubt they're going to like a soggy Mars bar. So it's the same thing, the same principle. You need to understand what the instinct of the fish is if you want to catch a fish. You need to understand the instinct of the human if you want to catch them and get them as a client. You need to understand the instinct of whatever it is that you're dealing with in order to be able to get the result that you want in life, regardless of whether you believe in it or not, or whether you like it or not, or whether it fits your ideology or not. Wow, that went very, very deeply today. So I think that's a good spot to wrap up on, and a very, very good and very important lesson. So if you enjoyed that, if you'd like to see more of these, you can find the rest of the recordings of this book and all the other books that we've read up until this point, Rich Dad Poor Dad, The Art of Thinking Clearly, on YouTube at the Passive Cash Flow Club. Would love to see you there. Would love to get your comments. Love to get your thoughts and ideas as well, because it's a little bit one-sided sometimes. So feel free to leave me your messages as well. And make sure you subscribe, because we've also started answering your questions. So if your question gets answered, you'll be notified. And if another question gets answered, you'll be notified. And who knows, it might be a question that is useful for you as well. It might help you with one of your investment challenges. If you'd like to ask a question, if there is something that you're not sure of, or if you'd like to directly tell me something around Ray Dalio principles, or around today's, or a different thing that we've spoken about, you can do that at Instagram. Would love to hear from you and get to know more of you personally on a one-on-one basis. And you can find me there at business_team_6_official. Would love to get to know you. And yes, feel free to send your questions so that I can answer those in video format and put them up on the YouTube channel for you, which I'm very excited to do. Last night, we also had our game of Cash Flow, our real life simulator, the online version, which takes it to a whole new level, which has more realism and helps you to be able to learn how to invest in business, real estate, the stock market, and different other investments. So if you'd like to join us for that, and you'll be able to get to meet me there, and I'm looking forward to playing that game together with as many of you as possible. You can also reach out on Instagram and let me know that you're interested in Cash Flow or the real life simulator, and I'll get my VA, my virtual assistant, to get in touch with you so that you can be notified of how to come and join us. It is not only fun, but it will teach you a lot, and it will allow you to start doing some real life investing, which is so important. So many people get caught up and excited about investing, but struggle to be able to implement it in real life. And we've set up this club so that we are going to be able to assist you to really start doing it in real life, and to get past some of those barriers that a lot of people have. So as I said, one thing that I've always been interested in is the human psychology, and how to get peak performance, and how to be able to get past some of those challenges that you might have on your path to getting the lifestyle and the life that you desire and deserve. Because, as we said, there is no good and bad in life. Everything is good from the perspective of how the world works with regards to optimizing for the whole. So we look at the world and we see a lot of things that we might think are bad, but really everything is good and serves a purpose. And that's because we generally look at it from our own perspective rather than the perspective of the whole. So we're going to leave it at that. I'm going to stop the recording. I am looking forward to seeing you again for another reading tomorrow. Have an absolutely amazing day today. Thank you so much for joining. And remember that if you keep doing things the same way, nothing will change. So make the switch. And I'm looking forward to helping some of you do that. Make the switch to unlock your rich, because that is how you unlock your riches.